Good evening and welcome to the Job Search Solution, the radio program where we talk about looking for a job, changing jobs, changing careers, hiring. And as always, we begin with a prayer. Dear God, grant us thy peace and thy mercy, thy will be done. And in just a few minutes, as we do every Wednesday evening, Rich Slavinsky is going to be with us talking about consultants in the workplace. He has a very interesting topic this evening and one that everybody's going to want to be listen to. It's a good one. We've been lately taking 10 minutes, 10 seconds to, you ought to take 10 minutes to do this anyhow, but 10 seconds of gratitude. So you can't be unhappy when you're grateful. So think of 3 things today that you're grateful for. Go. It's try to do this 3 times a day. It makes all the difference in the world. It really does. Um, being grateful. We're about to finish up the myths of hiring. We've got 2 myths that are probably one is really a myth, and one is one we don't hear very often anymore. We used to hear a lot of it, but the first one, like I said, we don't hear very much of anymore. It's the myth of the employer says, well, I've never heard of that company that the person's worked for, so they must not be very good. I've never heard of them. Well, there are more than close to 8 million companies in the United States. It's not likely you've heard, an employer has heard of the vast majority of them. Just because you haven't heard of a company doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't very good. But there are still employers out there. I heard it about 2 weeks ago. Well, if they're in our business and I haven't heard of them, they can't be very good. Well, that's just ignorant thinking. Uh, I I've known plenty of employers over the years that wouldn't hire anybody unless they knew them or knew the company that they were working for or knew somebody that knew them. So they were reference buyers. Couldn't be a good candidate unless they knew them or they knew somebody that knew them. Makes no sense. The next myth is probably one that is still has its own problems. That's the myth that people that are out of work aren't as good as people that are presently employed. Now, again, this is one that used to be a whole lot more prevalent and worrisome for employers than it is now. Since the pandemic, there's been a whole lot of change in this thinking, but there's still a few employers that think that if a person's out of work, they can't be as good of a candidate as a person that is employed, which simply isn't true. The average job in the United States um, lasts about 2.5 years, and that doesn't matter who you work for, and you could just get caught at the wrong time. I had an employer a number of years ago that used to tell me this all the time until he was the one that was out of work, and then it wasn't so bad. Uh, just because a person's out of work doesn't necessarily make them a bad candidate. The idea that, well, nobody gets rid of a person that isn't, nobody lays off or um, lets the person go that's really good, just simply not true. With companies change hands and all kinds of things happen, lots of people lose their jobs. It doesn't matter. The important thing to do is to find out why the person is out of work and the length of time that they are out of work, and to check good references and find out the real working behind it, what goes on behind it. Now, if a person over the past 10 years has been out of work 3 times and they were out of work a year and a half each time, that might be a little worrisome. But just because a person's out of work presently, and they maybe have been out of work for 12 or 18 months, at present, it's more a sign of the times than anything else. Just investigate it. Find out how many interviews they've had, what kind of job they're looking for, and the kinds of things that are going on in their life. Doesn't necessarily mean that they are a bad candidate, and doesn't necessarily mean it has anything to do with their ability to do your job or their professionalism. We're getting more and more what a candidate told me the other day, the sandwich generation in between raising your kids and taking care of your parents. There's a lot more interruption of your professional work than there was before, than years before. It's just that way. The thing to do is to find out the reasons a person's out of work, how much effort they've made in looking for a job, and what the effort has been, and what the situation has been. There are some industries and some professions where it's been extremely difficult to find a job and very hard. And it's not uncommon for a candidate to be out of work for a long period of time just because of the market. So that's definitely a myth, and one that one that um, one that shouldn't be paid that much attention to. Everybody might be out of work at some time, and that's just the way the economy goes. All right, we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. This is Tony Bashir with the Job Search Solution.